Hello, everyone, and welcome to this spoiler review for Season 4, Episode 6 of Succession Living Plus, which may be what I'm changing the Outlaw Nation to, judging from Kendall's presentation in this episode. I am the Outlaw John Rocha, joined as always by my fellow, my co-CEO here on this, Shannon McClung. How are you, Shannon?
I'm the what did you say? The Roman to your Kendall to Mike Vogel Shiv.
Wait, Mike Vogel, totally Shiv. Oh, please, you would absolutely be working. I mean, biting seems like something in the Mike Vogel repertoire, I would imagine. But yeah, there's a lot. Not talking about our fellow geek buddy. He can take it. But yeah, we're gonna jump into this episode. So much happened in this episode, and remember, guys, every episode is one day later. So this is the next day after everything we got in the last episode. Shannon, Living Plus, this one welcoming back Hustlers director LORENE SCAFARIA to direct this one as well. About an hour and 2 minutes, really I think the longest episode so far this season, and so much was involved here with Kendall delivering one of the most cringe-inducing yet effective speeches ever to launch a living app or whatever it is. Roman essentially kind of being talked into betraying Kendall by Shiv, and then ending up sitting in that car of his, listening to his father's voice, berating him as a way of dealing with his grief. Oh, and by the way, firing two powerful women simply because they wouldn't agree with him or give him the respect that he thinks he deserves. And Shiv working behind the scenes with Matsson and reigniting her affection for Tom as they've become equals in this insane tragedy, or a romantic tragic play that they're in. But so much happened in this episode here. What are your overall thoughts? Oh, and Matsson, of course, behind the scenes with that tweet that he ends up deleting. But what do you think about this entire episode and how this went down?
I mean, this one was kind of near and dear to my heart because as it was set in Los Angeles,
yes,
a few familiar spots. I believe that was Warner Brothers. They were on the back a lot there for Waystar. At least when Roman was on that golf cart. But yeah, I mean, just another just really, really terrific episode, and the breadth of talent in this cast never ceases to amaze me. I mean, we really get a great confrontation with David Rash as Carl versus Kendall. And you see, it just seems like it's headed for disaster.
Yes.
Succession has never been a show with a that's been tied up neatly with a bow with a happy ending. So my wife and I were chatting last night. She's like, what do you think is going to happen? Do you think the board's going to get rid of them both and install Shiv? Do you think they're just going to get rid of Kendall? It's like, I have no idea what is going to happen, but it is such an incredible ride. Sarah SNOOK doing some really awesome work in this one. Alexander Skarsgård as well. I mean, all of them. Jeremy Strong, KIERAN, CULKIN, the entire guest cast. I mean, everyone is fantastic.
Yeah, 100% across the board. Also, Gerri, who's doing wonderful work as well in the back and forth with Roman there, and what's going to happen between them. J. Smith Cameron giving her love, and as you mentioned, David Rash as well. Not too much Frank in this one, so clearly just chilling out there for the presentation. But certainly, poor Pete got an earful of Kendall there as he was trying to finagle Pete into creating numbers, which are not just numbers. These are numbers. They're not just numbers. So a lot of great lines in here, a lot of interesting power plays by Kendall. And I have a feeling that all three of them are going to be out by the time this is all over. I don't want to give away what I think I know about it, but I think Kendall's going to be run out once those numbers don't play out. I think Roman's going to leave because of all the backlash from what he did here in this episode. And I think Matsson is absolutely going to shank Shiv at the end and send her out. And maybe Tom, in a moment of love that maybe we had the seeds planted in this episode, leaves it all behind to be with her. I don't know, but I have a feeling that all three of them are not going to end up in any positions of power at Waystar by the time the dust settles at the end of the last episode. But we're talking about
in charge.
Ahead,
leaving cousin Greg in charge.
You're right. You're probably right. or maybe all the way back down to putting the things on. Who knows? We will see. But yeah, let's get into this episode here. As I said, directed by LORENE SCAFARIA, which is really great to have her back. It's written by Georgia Pritchett and Will Arbery. And we're going to break this thing down by kid storyline. So we're going to deal with Roman first, or sorry, Kendall first, then Roman, then Shiv. So let's deal with Kendall. So much went on with him in this episode. I mean, it's Investor Day at Waystar Studios. Certainly, Shannon, we've covered Investors Days for a number of studios doing the Geek Buddy. So to see it getting the behind the scenes at this for Waystar Studios, this is really fascinating to take a look at. They're promoting we hear about something called Living Plus. The episode begins with Roman doing with Logan doing the classic Logan things there on screen, berating the director, scoffing at her, the poor director, scoffing at her when she tells him to say exciting and actually sound excited by when you're saying exciting. All those little directions. I'm sure you've been in those moments when you're getting directed to say things a certain way, but we see how this is affecting Kendall and where he wants to do with it. And it's giving us a little bit of foreshadowing of what he's going to do later. And we hear this Living Plus thing being pitched, and and I saw someone on NPR compare it to Story Living by Disney. I had no idea this actually existed. This actually exists in Disney. Not quite how Kendall pitched it, but it's kind of close, where you can go to this community and essentially have Disney surround you 24/7. But we see him kind of building this up, and we see him caught up in the bro of it all, right? He's hyped up on this. We see him and Roman essentially betraying Shiv, and Shiv calling them out on it in that meeting. They lie about the stuff with what happened with Matsson on the mountaintop. Then he goes and starts working on this presentation. He wants to pump up the numbers because he wants to drive the stock up. They essentially want to make it so that they keep control of the company. So they're trying to mess with Matsson to the point where they price him out of the situation. Then we see him constructing this whole presentation and the way he wants it done. He wants a house with clouds. He doesn't. The new rule is no one can say no to him. And then when he walks out, he supports his brother in the madness that he's doing with firing Gerri and firing I think Amy, which we'll get to in a little bit. And then he comes out on that stage, and we see it's a barely constructed house. And when he asks for clouds, which he'd asked before, it's just some steam shooting out of pipes, completely unfinished, because it gave them less than 24 hours to build this thing. And then he walks out, and he's going to Roman tries to talk him out of the presentation. Kendall goes through with it. In that cheesy ass flight jacket, it reminded me of Mission Accomplished a little bit. And then he goes out there and pitches this thing. And it's essentially, he's pitching a combo of Theranos, which Elizabeth Holmes created, this idea that they could add 50 years to your life, help you with health, this kind of nonsense, and a little bit of Adam Newman stuff from WeWork, putting tech on top of houses, creating these communities where you all come together. It's this interesting situation. And Matsson tweets out that phrase that was above the Auschwitz death camps that essentially implies that he's pitching death camps for grannies. So by the end, though, it works. The same people who were bitching him out in the green room when they're watching this presentation are cheering him when he comes back, including Carl, who confronts him in the hallway before he walks out there. And by the end, he is walking on the beach. He has sent Kendall that video of Roman telling him he has a micro dick, and he jumps into the water. And of course, water being a big thing with Roman throughout the 4 episodes of
Kendall.
4 seasons. Kendall throughout this 4 seasons of this series. So your thoughts on Kendall and the story and everything that happened with him in this episode, brother?
I mean, again, another terrific performance from Jeremy Strong. Watching that video, it really reminded me, which folks, you all can find it on YouTube, of where William Shatner is doing. I can't remember if it's a commercial or if it's an audiobook or something, but there is an audio director who is correcting the way that he says sabotage. He's like, well, no, I say sabotage. I mean, there's this whole back and forth that even with that, it's just audio, so you don't have to look at it. Right. But it is so uncomfortable. But the moment where the director chimes in and you see the very, very light mask that Logan is wearing for the camera slides off, and as she's saying, well, we should do this, and Logan's which is something that I noticed Shiv doing a little bit more and more this episode is like her father's and watching how he's just like, oh, really, is that what we should do? And then you see the poor makeup artist coming in telling him, you know, screaming at her, don't, you know, stop buzzing around me. And then he talks about, you know, you're all useless, you're worse than my idiot kids. And Fisher Stevens is right there, Hugo saying, oh, you know, we're sorry, Ken. He's like, are you that's a Valentine's Day card. That's nothing. Watching how the whole idea that absolute power corrupts absolutely. I mean, we're kind of seeing that with Kendall and Roman. I mean, the whole moment where he comes in and he's looking at the theater, because having worked a few events for some bigger corporations as a performer, and then you see when the executives come in, the people who are ultimately saying yay or nay, and watching them with their great ideas and, you know, being completely ignorant to the time that has gone into whatever you're seeing and the time that is left. There was actually something that I opened and we had a director who was not working for the company. You know what company I'm talking about. I'm just not going to say it.
You don't need to say it.
But our executive, I thought very, very little of, and I got to be buddies with the director who, again, didn't work for the company. And I had to ask her, I'm like, in all your time, have you ever worked with someone who is less good at their job than this individual? And she said, Shannon, never. I've never worked with someone with more bad ideas. So watching how Kendall comes in and everyone on that production staff is trying to pass the ball. Nobody wants to be the one that says no. And like the guy Denny, who I'm assuming is, you know, the I guess the technical director, when he immediately tries to soft pedal, like, hey, that is a great vision. But don't say no, Denny. Don't say no. It is so uncomfortable. And then watching him come in and seeing that, you know, there just wasn't, could they have done it? Absolutely. You can do almost anything with enough time and money. But there was no time. And so you see that, you know, the little sprinkler system that is supposed to simulate clouds and just how underwhelmed Kendall is. And then the whole thing with the flight jackets. And you could see Roman does not want to be attached to it. Like, you know what? I'm gonna try to talk him out of it, but at the very least, I'm gonna save my own skin. And Kendall's whole thing of talking to the teleprompter, the cuts up into the control room, which I thought were so funny. I mean, Matthew McFadyen, that don't talk to the teleprompter, amateur. That was such a great moment. But you watch how Kendall's kind of floundering at the beginning, but then he wins the crowd over. And then he really wins them over when Matsson's tweet comes out. And how Kendall is pretty good at thinking on his feet. I mean, once he gets his feet wet, he's pretty good. And then the whole thing when he says, you know, a few years ago, I was disrupting. Now I'm the CEO, co-CEO. Again, just a really, really strong performance from Jeremy Strong. And Kendall is just getting stronger. I mean, they've already kind of admitted that Shiv has been boxed out a little bit. Roman is about to have a breakdown, and no one is going to be there to stop Kendall. So, I mean, again, just terrific work by Jeremy Strong.
I agree with you. No one does disappointment from greater heights than Jeremy Strong does. I mean, that moment when he sees the house in the clouds and he's just the way it all comes over him. And you don't sense that he's a guy who's going to kill anybody in the moment, or it's not anger that he's sitting on. It's just, he's going back to that well of disappointment that he knows so well. And also realizing, oh yeah, once again, one of my dreams didn't come true. I shot for the moon. It didn't happen. And this is a guy through the whole episode was like velocity, excitement, all these things all these catchphrases that he was using, come to bear in this moment. And he realizes that it's not going to work out. But like you said, one of the things that Kendall is most often good at in the show is thinking on his feet, whether in any situation. Look, when that kid died in the car that he was with, he figured out how to get the hell out of that situation and survive that situation, get back into the house, and essentially play as if nothing had happened. It wasn't until his father and the people that know his father and the guy who saw this whole thing, saw him leave with that guy, that his cover was blown. But he can figure situations out when situation goes to hell. He's a damn survivor. For all his attempts at possible suicide or possibly wanting to kill himself, he finds a way to survive. And so, or Court's death, rather. I don't mean kill himself, but Court's death. He finds a way to survive. And in this moment, multiple times throughout this episode, he finds ways to survive. When Shiv calls them out in the room that they're lying about the Matsson situation, it's Kendall who gives up first. Why? Because Kendall wants to survive. Roman can get buried, but Kendall must survive. And later, when he's going with the numbers, or when the idea of like maybe the Grays or the Graybeards won't get on board with this situation, he pumps up the numbers. He gets Pete to work on this stuff so that it looks like he can promote it. And then he gets Greg to go in there to talk to Mr. Snippy Snip and has him create this lie, in essence, with the video. Now, that video could come out because certainly we know, Shannon, people who work to quote unquote the lower rungs of entertainment have access to original copies of this stuff, and stuff like that leaks out. If that leaks out, that's going to absolutely fuck Kendall down the road in this situation. But for now, it's about presentation, and that's what a survivor does. And so he does all these things, and Roman and Shiv had no idea he had done this, which is yet another example of how he finds a way to survive. He knows they would have never gone for him adjusting his father's words or editing his father, essentially making his father lie about what he actually said by having certain things edited into his mouth at certain moments when his mouth was open. So it would pass that off. So just incredible. And then when that tweet comes out, and by the way, that tweet was Doderick to Mocked Fry. Doderick is, of course, the name of the dog that at the theme parks there for Waystar, the Bright Star Adventure Park, which, of course, Greg was in the outfit of, I think, the Doderick dog in the first episode. It's a German Arbecht macht frei. I hope for the German speakers, I apologize if I'm not pronouncing that correctly, but it means work sets you free. And this was the sign above the Nazi concentration camps in Auschwitz. So the picture that somehow he photoshopped quite quickly, or had a professional Photoshop for him quite quickly, Matsson did, of the dog in front of concentration camps, was incredible to put up there. But he pivots and he takes a moment and he says, I wouldn't have faved it, but I think he's going to get on board once he sees it. And hey, he's European, and so hey. And then after Shiv talks to Matsson takes the tweet down. So he finds a way, and then by the end, he shoves it in Roman's face and goes and jumps in the beach and swims in the cold of the beach in the morning. And I think with his feet, with his foot, he carved out number 1. So he essentially, in his mind, has become the top dog, because Roman, by capitulating, has now thrust Kendall first, or face first, to be the face of the company. So interesting stuff throughout, and I really enjoyed it. But that being said, I think what we're going to see running throughout all 3 of these storylines, Shannon, is they're all trying to be their father without the substance and experience of their father. So you get Kendall and his desires for these big dreams and big ideas and big things, but there is no foundation or basis in Kendall's experience of launching big things. And the way this presentation came off, Shannon, I don't know about you, but I thought about his birthday party, which was an aberration on this earth. When you're watching that episode of his birthday party, which was just so difficult to watch there. So, it just was fascinating to watch this all play out. What do you think that he's trying to be his dad, but doesn't have the substance, or am I off base here?
No, I think they all are. I think, with him saying big shoes, I mean, despite the fact that it was on the teleprompter, I think
7 times though.
I think it was by the 3rd time that he said it was like,
yeah,
he's in trouble.
Yeah.
We've all had that moment on stage.
Oh yeah, I got Aviator vibes when the first time he starts doing the issues that he's having in DiCaprio as Howard Hughes. I got those vibes watching that.
Yeah, I mean, I think each of the 3 kids has an aspect of Logan in them. The big thinker, that's Kendall. The vitriol, I mean, that is Roman.
Yeah.
And Shiv, I don't know. I have to think about that for a second. But I mean,
she's the political machinations behind the scenes, getting in bed with whoever she needs to get in. I don't mean physically, but getting in bed with whoever she needs to get into to survive, to get into a position where she comes out on top. So, I mean, she's the one that calls them out. Well, we'll get to Shiv. I don't want to go too far on Shiv, but yeah, I think that's her position that she's essentially, you know, the schemer to stay alive, and push the sale through, you know, because it seems like she's the one that's on board with pushing the sale through. Do you think?
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
100%. I think
Yeah.
they have not, you know, she was the one who called them out in this
Yes.
episode, which,
Right.
which
Right.
we'll get to.
Yeah.
But yes, I think she's still of the mind of we need to get out.
Yeah. Yeah. And for those of you who don't know, you should research WeWork and see what Adam Newman did and the madness that Adam Newman did, trying to trying to essentially create office space that felt like new and exciting and tech and different, when in fact it was just office space. And he also had these grand visions and pumped up numbers and pushed this nonsense, and it all fell apart. And if you haven't researched Theranos, you should absolutely research Theranos. So Elizabeth Holmes recently got delayed going to prison. She's going to prison for 11 years for the lies that she pulled on people with her company. And she recently got it delayed for another month, which is insane, because she also tried to back out of prison by having a baby and trying to force the judge to not send her into prison because she's a new mom, a new mom. So that didn't work either.
Both of those stories have been made into limited series.
Yes.
With We Crashed on Apple. That's the WeWork one, which is dynamite.
So
I don't
good.
think Jared Leto and Anne Hathaway have ever been better.
Yeah.
And The Dropout on Hulu with Amanda Seyfried.
Yeah, which she was fantastic in that series as well. Right. Let's move on to Roman here. Roman, you know, we already talked about him essentially lying to Shiv in that room until Kendall throws him under the bus. But Kendall sends him out to go have the conversation with Joy Palmer. That's who Annabeth Gish is playing, the great Annabeth Gish, who we've seen in numerous projects over the years. She is Joy Palmer, who in essence, I mean, to me, they've been saying that Succession is essentially Fox News, or the idea of Rupert Murdoch and all of this idea. So at ATN, essentially maybe Fox News. But this is so interesting because Joy Palmer may be a Fox executive or Fox chairman or a person in charge of Fox, meeting with someone who has this idea, this situation going on with their news company, ATN, becoming right-leaning. But anyway, Roman comes into this meeting with Joy. She's the head of Waystar Studios. You know, Kendall tells him to sprinkle some sugar and up our velocity and break the log jam and get the franchise pumping and shoot it to the moon because of all these issues with Calispatron. I think I'm saying
Calispatron.
That right. Calispatron. It's so weird. But she, you know, she's gracious at the beginning there. They're meeting at this restaurant. And of course, they've cleared everything out. There's security there. And she offers her condolences, but Roman's not having any of it. He's full of condolences. His tummy is full. They start to have conversations about where they want to go. Roman's saying, I'm going to dump a lot of money on you guys. I just need you guys to, you know, get things in order or get it going here. But Joy counters and says, yes, but this ATN situation, essentially they're Fox News, going right-leaning is a problem for us here. For some of the creative types, they may not want to work with, essentially implying that they may not want to work with the studio. Some of the bigger people in Hollywood may not want to work with them because of their connection to this, what's happening with their news brand, and that they're leaning towards Mencken and all of this. And this is so interesting to me because Roman counters by saying, you know, you guys are this privileged few, they've cut yourselves off, and essentially implying that you guys are judgy as the other side, and feels like Joy is not giving him the proper respect, and even says like, you know what, I think you're not, you don't think I'm worth your respect. You don't treat me like I can't do the job, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, maybe I'll just fire you. I could just fire you. And then she laughs and he goes, oh, you're laughing? Well, I could do it. I've said it. Now I got to own up to it. Boom. And then he does it and just walks out. He just walks out, which is insane. Then he goes to that meeting there with Roman, or with Kendall rather. And then Gerri calls him into the room, and Gerri starts to berate him for firing Joy. And this becomes an issue for Roman, who again falls back on the idea of disrespect. Now, I do think Gerri was, not understanding the fact that he is a co-CEO, but then again, their history of him sending her dick pics and him enjoying the fact that she berated him comes into play in all of this. And so she feels like she's got this familiarity with him, but then he counters. And this is really interesting, Shannon, about you. But the difference between Roman on the ship hemming and hawing about firing Gerri in front of her to the Roman that is here now in the room is a different Roman. He's a much more stronger, powerful. The way Lorene Scafaria placed the camera to shoot him a little bit higher up in terms of status. And then he fires Gerri in essence. And she says to him, Joy has a lot of relationships. She has a lot of friends. You are a weak monarch in a dangerous interregnum. So she's essentially saying he's, you're just shepherding this thing. she doesn't understand that he's going to trying to tank the deal until she does understand that he's going to tank the deal. And she tells him, you cannot win against the money. And that becomes a huge deal. But Roman goes to Kendall, and Kendall essentially says, yeah, do it. Fire Gerri, fire Joey. Let's do it. Yeah, bro, us forever. Woo! This kind of nonsense, which is so crazy. And then Shiv talks to Roman and gets in his ear. And eventually that's what sends Roman there backstage to tell Kendall that he doesn't want to be part of the presentation anymore. And he thinks we shouldn't do it, should delay it, what have you. But then when it goes off and it's successful and the returns are good, according to Hugo and Carolina there, Kendall sends him that video of his father saying, I think he has a micro dick or something. And he just listens to it over and over and over again. And essentially Roman has become number 2 in this situation. So what'd you think of how the storyline went in this episode for Roman here?
I mean, the back and forth between Roman and Joy, where you do see,
great scene,
yeah, I mean, Annabeth Gish, is such a wonderful performer. We love to watch her, pop up into anything.
Yeah.
But you see this this dynamic where she does not want to have to kiss the ring of a kid. And if you and Roman even says it, if you look at his track record, it's not so hot. And they're really just kind of minding the ship until Matsson and until the sale goes through, until Matsson is in charge. So the whole idea that he's just kind of like, all right, who's getting fired for Calypsotron? Because that's a mess.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, you know what? That's really complicated. And like these sort of, I mean, he's not wrong. These sort of disrespect of like, you're not going to understand this. But also, I think because ultimately, as she is the head of the studio, even though she may not have been on the one who on set making a bad movie, she is the head of the studio. Buck stops with her. It is her fault. Like she has to take the lumps for it. So the fact that she's like, it's complicated, let's table that for right now. And the whole idea that ATN has become this right-leaning network and creatives don't necessarily want to work. I mean, we saw this happen in Georgia with like the abortion ban that could have, I don't know if it actually ever went through, but all of these studios were threatening because Georgia is a thriving film and television community. And because of the government there, like the studios are saying, like, we'll pull stuff. Actually, I don't believe it was the studios. Excuse me. I believe it was individual people, showrunners, stars and who were like, we're not going to work there if this is what happens. So, but again, Roman, for all of his crass behavior, Roman's not dumb. And his whole thing, like, okay, like we're all the same. Like this ridiculously segregated city that you all have built on a fault line. It's like, we're all the same. And his whole thing of Mencken's an IP. Mencken, he's going to be here today. He is going to be gone tomorrow. We're forever. So you see the way that she overplays her hand a little bit. Yeah. When she says, I'm sure, you got here for a good reason. And Roman is not wrong in that moment to be like, to basically throw her job out in front of her, be like, hey, well, you know what? I can do this. Yeah. And you see it gets serious for a second. And like going to the Gerri conversation, as Joy says, this is a mistake. And Roman's okay. Joy's whole thing, like, you've opened us up to litigation, all these things, like you can't just fire someone like that. And it's like, well, can you not? I mean, if it was as ironclad, I think maybe she wouldn't have said this is a mistake. It wouldn't have been that kind of that Hail Mary to be like, hey, let's try to talk. Right. But watching how Roman has changed now that Roman is partially in charge. Like, I went back and watched the first episode recently and seeing the evolution of that character where it was his dad and then it was supposed to be Kendall. So Roman was like, whatever, it doesn't matter what I do. Like, I'm never going to be the one responsible. I'm always going to be taken care of. It doesn't matter. Yeah. You see the shifting in his maturity. And even though he is still a dick, but you see there is a little bit more accountability on his part. And when he sees Gerri being disrespectful to him, as he takes it, because again, he's known her his whole life. Like that is, as Kendall said, that's Shiv's godmother. He's known her his whole life. So did she overstep? Yes. Did he overcorrect? Yes.
Yeah.
So, but you also saw her at the investor day,
Right.
Sitting in the audience with Carl and Frank. So even he
Well,
walked
above
back
the audience, to be fair, above the
Oh,
audience.
sure. But even he walked back firing Joy. He's like,
Right.
I told her she was fired. I didn't fire her.
Right.
Like there are things we're going to be able to do here. But the moment that he tells Gerri that, you know, you're bad at your job, and you see how much that, I mean, J. Smith-Cameron is fantastic.
Yeah.
You see how much that affects her. As he's walking out, and after she calls him a fucking asshole,
Yeah.
I thought for sure Gerri was going to come up and sucker punch him. I thought he's going to get punched in the back of the head right now. But you see the lack of foundation that Roman has in this role, that it doesn't take a lot for someone whose influence he does care about, which in this case is his siblings.
Yeah.
It doesn't take much for him to go one way or the other.
Yeah, I like what Craig Armstrong said in the post doc they do on these episodes, and he said, you know, in one way you can respect the fact that Roman can make these decisions quickly and has no problem firing people, and his father did the same thing. But on the other side, is this going to be something that blows up in their face? We won't know, and he said we won't know until later in the season. But yeah, I mean, but it also brings up the conversation about his misogyny, and this is there for Roman for all 4 seasons. He's never treated any women with respect, really, as equals, or he's either submissive or dominant. There is no equal situation with Roman with any of the women who ever been. I think there was, you know, with who's the woman he was with for a couple, and they never had sex.
The tall blonde one.
Yeah,
they never in season 1, I think.
Yeah, and then they kind of moved her off the show without even explaining. Which I think KIERAN CULKIN did an article recently where he talked about what happened with that. But yeah, this whole idea of Roman firing these powerful women in these moments simply because as a child he doesn't feel he's getting this respect from them, and rightfully so, because he's done nothing. He's literally done almost nothing compared to what these women probably had to endure and overcome and push through and fight to establish themselves in their positions. Yes, a young privileged punk kid coming up wanting respect from them, you would imagine they would stand their ground strongly and push back on him. And he fires them because he can't deal with that. And there's again elements of his father, but without the foundation and understanding of what the best route is. And Gerri's not wrong, like you said. Gerri's not wrong. Does she overstep? Yes, but she's not wrong in that people should have been in the room. People should have been there so that there's evidence and witnesses and everything was done by the book, or else you can get sued. You know, people get sued all the time for wrongful termination and companies pay out. Happens all the time. So she's right in that situation. But where is this going to lead Roman? I'm very fascinated. And clearly it's all goes all the way back to his mom. If you remember that wedding in Italy there and how she just kind of, we hear about how she treated Roman. We hear about her abandoning the kids, throwing the kids to Logan happily and roaming and leaving them behind. So clearly there's a lot of deep-seated anger towards older women or women, period, in his world, but certainly older women, which allowed him to do what he did here. And we'll see if it's good or bad for sure, Shannon. Let's take a quick break and we'll jump into Shiv's storyline and wrap up our review right after this.
Boom, 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 boom. It doesn't have a discernible theme other than the deep strings and the piano.
You should just do.
I think I tried to do that last time and I wasn't happy with the results, but based off of this, yeah, I'll go back to that.
Maybe it works. All right, let's move on to Shiv here. Wow, what movement by Shiv here. She is, how can I say this? She is in a jet parking lot, and a fellow person with a jet, Lucas Matsson, is just across the way. He comes over, has a conversation with her after she won't go over and talk to him, and he essentially pitches her being his mole in all of this, and she's like, well, I don't know if I want to, I think I hate you, and they have this back and forth, and essentially he puts it on the table that the brothers pulled some shenanigans up on the mountain with him, so that's her first inkling of it, and she knows nothing about it. Then Matsson leaves, she goes to this meeting. First of all, Kendall sits in her chair, which is a real passive-aggressive dick move. Then she pulls her phone, sits down, and he tries to play like, oh, were you here? Yeah, bullshit. And then she calls them out and even goes back and uses, you know, some shit from the past where when they were kids, she spilled chocolate milk in the Range, or they spilled chocolate milk on the Range Rover and blamed her for it. So she calls them out, and Roman is the first, or Kendall's the first one to capitulate. Then Roman eventually comes aboard and tries to do the huggy thing, but she's clearly not into it. Then we see her interacting with Tom throughout this episode as well, them having this initial interaction where he catches her crying because she has scheduled her grief into her day. They have this beautiful coming together kind of moment. Then they kiss. And then later in the investors' party there on the rooftop, they have this kind of flirting, busting each other's balls back and forth, which really veers the line into dangerous, toxic territory. And then to add cherry on top of that cake, they play the biting game, which, according to Sarah Snook, is something one of the writers actually did with her brother, which is what influenced that in this, that they would bite until one finally gave up because they bit too hard. And it was Tom who wins this, which is really interesting. But she zings him by saying, wow, Tom Wam's games actually made me feel something, which is really interesting. But later we see that they're post-coital and putting their clothes back together. They've had sex. And they have this wonderful conversation, man. I mean, this is some great writing here. This wonderful conversation about how their situation came about. And Tom essentially says, you never let me in. I was there. I cared, but I did this. And yeah, I chased you for the money. I chased you for the access. I like the finer things. I love my life. You know, would I throw it all away? No. Would you? Would you throw it all away to be with me? And they do what rich people do about that kind of stuff. They share a laugh, imagining being poor and sitting off by themselves. And then later, we see her get on the phone with Matsson, and Tom is in the room now. And Tom, they're equals now. Tom is comfortably sitting in the chair, feet on the desk, no less, while she's talking to Matsson about the situation, about Living Plus and all of that. And then later, we see her on the phone with Matsson about the situation going down with Kendall on that presentation. She's the one that tells him that that you can put spokes in the wheels here. But then when he releases the tweet, which goes a bit too far, a lot too far, she's the one that calls him and essentially gets him to take it down. And then later we see her in the car with Tom. And it seems to me, Shannon, that they're going to have a conversation with Matsson to figure out how they can save both their jobs and screw Kendall and Roman, or at least stop Kendall and Roman from leading this company to ruin. What do you think of everything that happened with Shiv here in this episode?
Again, all of the kids are great at critiquing from from the sidelines.
Well, certainly Shiv is, for sure.
Like, you never, like, once they're in the hot seat, and Kendall kind of lucked out. Yeah. But it's when they're critiquing from the sidelines that they are all the most effective. Yeah. And Sarah Snook is just dynamite. I mean, watching how, having the little meet cute in the PJ airport, and having Matsson, the guy who is in the ultimate power position right now, he comes to her. She's basically like, no, I'm not getting off the plane. I thought it was so funny that Skarsgård got off the plane barefoot, which I was just like, oh yeah, that's something that a super uber wealthy guy would be like, no, I'm good. I don't need the shoes on the scalding hot runway. But watching how she is now, she's very aware that she is being boxed out, and she is operating in her own self-interest, which, not that she's actively scheming with Matsson, but she is an ear. Like, she's definitely keeping that line of communication open. Yeah. So, again, that moment where Jeremy Strong sits in her seat, and you see, it's just, again, such great nonverbal acting, like that walk in and, that's such an easy moment to overplay, but that was just 100% authentic. Like, that is what would happen. And Jeremy Strong immediately recognized, oh, sorry, Shiv, which means, like, okay, so you knew it was there. That was a choice. Yeah, asshole.
Yeah.
But the whole thing about, like, her saying, lie to me, lie to my face. Yeah. Like, I know you. I know you. I know what you're trying to do. This was our plan. This is what we were all going to get out clean and get Pierce. Yeah. And then, Kendall and Roman are living in this fantasy where it's like, maybe we can do both. And it's like, she is hedging her bets. Like, she's not going to actively oppose them, but that's again, keeping that line of communication open with Matsson.
Well, Tom's the one that says it to her. Keeping your options open, honey. You got to be careful with that. Yeah.
Well, and everything with Tom this episode. Her conversation with Tom, how she needed to be in the power position, but now that he is coming back at her more,
Yeah.
this has unearthed a new interest
Mhm.
for her. But she still is dealing with the betrayal that happened. Like, ultimately, this is the guy who turned my world upside down. This guy
Yeah.
potentially could have blown up my life. But there's something intriguing about it. And this
Right.
whole idea that, like, she's like, oh, who you looking at? Who you looking at here? Who you looking at there?
Oh,
Like,
man. Yeah.
well, I mean, they had the conversation before they got married about having an open marriage.
True.
And
True.
Tom, you could tell Tom didn't want to do it. But
Yeah.
now that they're on the other side of it, on the other side of this marriage and what has happened, Shiv is a little more, she's a little more charmed by Tom. I did think it was funny, not funny, but coincidental that she schedules time to cry just like Keely does in Ted Lasso.
Good points. Yeah. Yeah.
They need that dedicated time where they can grieve. But yeah, I mean, it was funny as Shani, my wife, and I were watching it. Shani was, as she's talking to Matsson in front the striking Viking, in front of Tom. Shani's like, has she not learned her lesson? Do not say anything in front of Tom. But yes, it does look like at the moment like they might be one. I think they're getting back together, but also it looks like they might be teaming up. So yeah.
Shani, these are established intellect. You're an established intellectual, intelligent person who understands how to play the game when necessary. Shiv is not at times, and so that's the whole conflict here, which I think works. So I absolutely understand where Shani was coming from when she watched that. Yeah, you're like, why are you doing this? What are you doing right now? Even to me, when Kendall and Roman are bringing Greg in to be their pitch bot, I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you bringing him into the situation? You think you can control him? This guy has managed to work his way to the position he's worked in such a short amount of time. Why would you trust this guy? So it's just funny the little things that they do that are self-destructive impulses and tendencies, but their father has instilled that in them because he's essentially ruled them through terror their entire lives. So they have no real self-love. They have the brutal self-love, which is sacrifice everyone to save myself, but they don't have the actual self-love to understand how to keep themselves out, how not to put their hand in the flame. Like they all three of them have to, in a weird way, find the way to put their hand in the flame. And can they recognize that they're doing it? No, but all three of them do it. And so it's because they've been just so thoroughly messed up by their parents that this is how they act. Not that I'm taking blame away from them, but certainly you can understand it from an objective point of view why they do the things that they do. Yeah, I mean, to me, the scene with Roman and Joy is a standout scene in the episode, and the scene with Tom and Shiv here, where they're just having the conversation, and Tom really reveals, like it was, I didn't want to be caught between you and Logan. Like I was going to be sacrificed in essence, and I like my life. I like the things that I get in my life, and so being really honest with her. And yeah, Shannon, it's kind of interesting to see that they've crossed the Rubicon now and they're equals. And I think she wanted an open marriage because in her mind, maybe, and this is me speculating, because there are plenty of people who are happy in open marriages. I'm not disparaging that. Do what works for you as long as you're both consensual. But with him, it seemed like she wanted the open marriage because she wasn't fully ready to commit to Tom or allow him into her world. But now that they're equals, I think that goes away completely. But they are going to become a throuple with Matsson, so that's going to be real interesting. I don't mean intimately, I mean business-wise. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out for sure. Any final words, anything else you want to say about this episode that we might have missed or didn't cover here, brother?
No, man, this was just another good one. This season is, home run after home run.
Yeah, I got two things. One, where's Marcia in all of this? There's no way she's going to be happy that Kendall edited footage of her former husband there to say things that he didn't say. She might have been on set, off camera, watching this whole thing go down. That might be possible. And then the other side of this is what is Connor doing right now? Is he fighting Marcia right now about what to do with Logan's body? So hopefully we'll get an update on that in the next episode for sure. But a lot of great lines. Again, fantastic lines here. A lot of great storylines playing out on the beach throughout this episode. Just great stuff. Sometimes, Shannon, we have seasons that final seasons of shows that don't quite live up to the hype. this is killing it episode per episode so far for sure. All right, thank you all so much for watching this spoiler review of episode 6 of season 4 of Succession. We appreciate it madly. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Thanks for listening to us as well, because it is available on the Outlaw Nation podcast network. Every one of the episodes are going to be up this week for you all to catch up on our thoughts on it. And as we head into the back 4 episodes left in this season. Shannon, another fun review. Please let people know where they can find you, brother.
Yeah, you can follow me on social media, on Twitter at Shannon_McClung, on Instagram at Shannon the Geek Buddy, and you can see me every week with Mr. Roga and the absent Mr. Vogel for the Geek Buddies.
There you go. As for me, at The Rocha Says on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, please make sure to subscribe to the channel down below and hit that bell button and see all the content we got coming up here on the Outlaw Nation this week for sure. All right, y'all take care of yourselves. Be well. Velocity! And we'll talk to you next time with a brand new spoiler review episode of Succession here on the Outlaw Nation.